Good evening, Professor Christiansen. Good evening, student fellows. I am not able to be with you this evening, and that's why the professor gave me the opportunity to present to you through this video, and I want to say thank you about that. We are all analyzing the agreement between Google and Samsung, and now I will present the section related to alternative dispute resolution and governing law. Here we have the section 12.6 from the agreement between Google and Samsung. And we know now that the global tendency to define such paragraphs or sections is growing. And why, we will see in the following slides. What can we find here? We can find first the controlling law or the governing law. And also, we can find here the alternative dispute resolution. And we will explain what is that in the following slides. Now, we will focus in the most important points in this paragraph. First, we read, "This agreement and all matters arising out of or relating to this agreement shall be governed by the laws of the State of New York." Second, we read, "All disputes, controversies, or differences which may arise between the parties out of, or relation to, or in connection with this agreement should be settled amicably through friendly negotiation." 3. We read, "In the event of any controversy, shall be finally settled in accordance with the rules of arbitration of the International Chamber of Commerce in Singapore." And fourth, "Any and all disputes, controversies, or claims shall be instituted in a state of federal court in New York, and Google and Company agree to submit the exclusive jurisdiction of these courts." And now, which concepts do we need to clarify before we continue analyzing this section? The first concept from the first point is governing law. The second concept is negotiation. The third point or concept is arbitration. And the fourth concept we need to check is jurisdiction. It is very well known that different countries or even different states from the same country have different laws, and the different laws have different interpretations about the same situations. So the companies, when they want to sign a contract, they have to define which governing law they will take in the case they have a dispute in the future. If they don't define that, in the case of a dispute, they would spend a lot of money and efforts and time agreeing under which law they would solve this dispute. In the case of the agreement between Google and Samsung, they define that the New York law will be the governing law. And the New York law will be the frame in which they will solve the possible problems. And this is not only if they are in front of a judge, this is also if they are solving the problems in another ways, in an amicable ways. The companies have several instances where they can solve their differences, and it is very desirable that they solve the differences in an amicable way, in a friendly way. But if this doesn't work, they usually go to the court. Which court? This depends directly on which jurisdiction was defined in the contract. And in the case of the agreement between Google and Samsung, they define the courts will be the New York courts, specifically the courts of the island of Manhattan. This is very important to be defined. A typical mistake is to define the jurisdiction only related to a country, but there are countries that have more legal systems like China or United States. And that's why it is important to define the specific legal system under which they could solve the problems legally. And why we can find several international agreements that are defining New York law, for example, as their governing law, and also they are defining their jurisdiction as New York City. We can find two main reasons for that. The first is that in New York we can find many entities that are there located. And the second reason is that the law of New York is a very sophisticated body, especially regarding commercial law. And because of that, the results of the litigations can be very predictable. As I said before, companies have several instances where they can solve their differences before they go to a court. And these instances are called alternative dispute resolutions, or ADR. Different authors have different types of alternative dispute resolutions. Here we will check the main three. The first of them is negotiation. In negotiation, there is no other part involved. Only the two parties, the two companies, in a friendly way, they discuss about the differences and they look for the best way to solve them. The second alternative dispute resolution is the mediation. The mediator is a third part who is in between of these two parties with a conflict, and he's trying to guide them to find a better solution. And actually, he's making a proposal as a solution, and they decide if they take it or they won't take it. A third alternative dispute resolution is the arbitration. Here, there is also a third part involved, which is a private judge who develops and imposes a resolution. And the other two parties with the problem, they have to accept it and apply it. The clauses in the agreements where an arbitration is specified are called Scott-Every clauses. Now we will review the advantages of using alternative dispute resolution techniques. The first of them is that with these techniques, the costs of resolution are greatly lower. The second advantage is that we have more flexibility to find solutions that can fit better to both parties. The third of them is that the control of the processes of resolution stays always in the companies, in the parties involved. And the fourth of them is that with these techniques, we can keep the confidentiality of the processes. Now we can see in the case of the agreement between Google and Samsung that they choose an alternative dispute resolution technique, specifically an arbitration made the International Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. But why in Singapore? First, they have adopted UNCITRAL. UNCITRAL is a model law designed by the UN to secure successful processes of arbitration. Second, they have the facilities to do it very well and very professionally. They have, for example, the SIAC. The SIAC is the Singapore International Arbitration Center, where they have all the facilities to bring the processes to the success of the negotiation or arbitrations. And third, they are very well known as neutral in international arbitration processes. To summarize, we will check the key concepts we learned in this presentation. Every agreement needs to define which is the governing law in which the parties will look for a solution in case of a conflict in the future. The contract also needs to define the jurisdiction in case the conflicts are not solved and they have to go to the court. But the contract also needs to define an alternative dispute resolution technique or several of them, because in these instances the companies can solve the disputes or the possible disputes keeping the advantages. Thank you very much for listening, and greetings from Rostock.